Stay tuned for urban legends to ghostly tales of the paranormal, because now it's time for
Message on the Wall.
Message on the Wall welcomes you to another presentation in the series of Haunted Cemeteries, this time visiting Maryland. We begin in Baltimore at the Green Mount Cemetery. For those of you who know the legend of Black Aggie, the statue of a weeping angel that is said, at night, to come to life, this is where, at one time, it could be found. After vandalism and graffiti was sprayed upon it, Black Aggie was removed several years ago, though there are still those who go in search of her. Greenmount Cemetery, with its brick wall enclosure topped off with a mesh fence, can be found on Greenmount Avenue. Some very influential personages in their time are buried at the site, from governors and mayors to Civil War generals, leading to visitors with all types of interests. Members of the Wilkes-Booth family can also be found at Greenmount, including John Wilkes-Booth, the assassin of Abraham Lincoln, though he is interred in an unmarked grave, with some believing him to haunt his final resting place. Greenmount, which is still a working cemetery, does have some very strict rules for visitors. It is best for anyone wishing to visit to call in advance, with all visitors expected to sign in. Photographs can be taken, but not for commercial use, but they do not allow video footage or other audio-visual recordings. Being open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m, it would be essential to get permission, if at all possible, for a nighttime vigil. Dedicated in 1839, it has since become the final resting place for over 65,000 residents. There are a number of tours that take place that help with its upkeep. Moving south to West Fayette Street, it is difficult to believe that nestled within the high-storey buildings is what could be one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States. The Westminster Burial Ground has been there since 1786, that contains some of Baltimore's prestigious families. There are many restless souls said to haunt the graveyard, as at one time it became a place to acquire bodies to sell to the medical profession, and not forgetting those who died a horrible, tormented death, suffocating as they had been buried alive. City officials eventually decreed that all graveyards should be accompanied by a church, which was somewhat of a problem, as the cemetery had already been established some 60 years. And so the church that stands there today was built over many graves that form a catacomb, which, on request, can be toured. The most prominent ghost is said to be that of Edgar Allan Poe, who is seen wearing a brimmed black hat, scarf covering part of his face, woolen waistcoat and trousers, and of course, as in life, carrying a walking stick that has been said to be heard tapping against the ground as he roams the cemetery along with others. The most prominent time to see the author and poet is on his birthday, that being January the 19th. Tours with a charge attached take groups round the cemetery into the church and below into the catacombs. The burial grounds are open from 8 a.m. till dusk, and so any nighttime vigil should be done with permission. Going somewhat outside the centre of Baltimore is the Gardens of Faith Memorial Gardens. The open cemetery can be accessed from Lillian Holt Drive, with another entrance on Trumps Mill Road in the suburb of Rosedale. According to the Shadowlands website, a male spirit wanders there during the day, while the wispy sighting of a female is said to guard the place at night. This is relatively new, only coming into service in 1940, and is still a working cemetery. For those investigators with EMF meters, that's electromagnetic field meters, you should be aware there are pylons running along Lilienholt Drive. The view of the cemetery from the Baltimore beltway that runs alongside the Memorial Gardens is shrouded by trees and cement slab wall. Heading west to Frederick, located at the corner of South Market Street and Stadium Drive, is the Mount Olivet Cemetery, where some impressive grave markers may be worth the visit alone. The fenced-off graveyard, which is still a working cemetery, was established in 1852 with some very prominent residents, including Francis Scott Key, who composed the Star-Spangled Banner. Any paranormal investigations may have to take place during the day, as candlelight ghost tours of Frederick have the sole rights to enter the graveyard after closing hours, giving a talk on the history along with the paranormal on a 90-minute trip around the graveyard. And moving on, just south of where the Battle of Antietam took place, is the Antietam National Cemetery. The Battle of Antietam was one of the bloodiest in the Civil War. It began at the break of dawn on September the 17th, 1862. The one-day battle in which General Robert E. Lee withdrew his troops back to Virginia left over 23,000 dead and wounded. The National Cemetery saw the burial of Federal soldiers from the battle, where there are 1,836 being unidentified. As with many battlefields where so many died, it is said to be haunted. The cemetery is no longer taking interments, having closed in 1953, though there have been two exceptions, the first being Congressman Goodloe Byron, who died of a heart attack at the young age of 49 in 1978, and again in 2000 when Patrick Howard Roy was interred at the National Cemetery when he was killed in the Al-Qaeda attack on the United States guided missile destroyer, the US Cole. The main entrance is on Maryland Route 34, with a second entrance a little farther along containing a parking area. And for our last haunted cemetery we go to Hagerstown and the Rose Hill Cemetery. Situated on the corner of South Potomac Street and Memorial Boulevard East, many of the Confederate soldiers who died at the Battle of Antietam were brought to Rose Hill, where they still remain. It's said that many of those soldiers now haunt the fenced-in confines of the graveyard, searching for a way to return to the south. Another spirit that is said to be seen is that of a female wearing the black of mourning, weeping by the grave of her husband. But should anyone try to approach her, she disappears. And those are haunted cemeteries in the very haunted state of Maryland. You have been listening to Message on the Wall, brought to you in association with Paranormal Parodies. You can find Paranormal Parodies at paranormal-parodies.com.